The year is 1864. A violent civil war in Mexico, which began 6 years earlier, has evolved into something far more complex, the Franco-Mexican War. Napoleon III has invaded the country, capitalizing on its weakened military strength. His goals go beyond merely extracting payment for unpaid war loans to the Mexican government. He aims to colonize the nation and expand the French Empire into Central America. Having defaulted on their European debts and facing ongoing conflict with both Mexican conservatives and now the invading French army, Mexican President Benito Juárez's coffers have been completely depleted by the war effort. Unable to secure support from the United States, which is embroiled in its own civil war, and in desperate need of rifles and ammunition, President Juárez quickly gathered donations, gold, silver, jewels, and other precious items from his fellow Mexican patriots. The treasure amounted to $619,000, which today would be worth over $22 million. The plan was to deliver this war chest to San Francisco, where it would be exchanged with the Union Army for the much-needed weapons to continue the fight for Mexican independence. However, the treasure never reached its destination. It was buried, and one by one, all the men who transported it ended up dead, quite bizarrely. From the moment it began its journey from Mexico to San Francisco, it seems that every man who ever handled this war treasure, or simply sought to find where it was last buried, has died, often a sudden and painful death. Some might call that a coincidence, but what is a coincidence except a word for something we cannot explain? Others call it a curse. This is the story of the cursed treasure of Cahuenga Pass. Music. Past the mist which hangs before you offers you a choice. To pass through or to escape. Beyond it are stories which defy explanation and fly in the face of what we know to be real. It is a void of both reality and impossibility, of both fact and superstition. You alone are left to discern what to believe as you pass through what we call fog. Applause. Music. Yeah, you have a parcel being cleared due to invalid zip code, scam. How is your work going today? Who are these people? Can you remind me to pick up the groceries, from an unknown number? Seriously, pretending to be my wife? That's bold. Odds are, I'm not the only one who gets random junk messages and calls like this every single day. Why? Because data brokers collect and sell our personal information, like our phone numbers and addresses. And that is why Aura is the sponsor of today's video. These companies are scavengers, and they are putting our families at risk. Let Aura find the data brokers that are exposing your information and submit opt-out requests on your behalf. Aura has been unbelievably helpful in reducing spam and protecting my personal information. Aura also protects you from identity theft, monitors billions of data points for threats, and offers tools like antivirus software and a password manager, all in one app. I'm not leaving me or my family vulnerable to data breaches. Go to Aura.com stories. Benito Juárez is a name that lies at the center of the extensive, violent, and complex conflicts that took place in Mexico during the mid-19th century. A Zapotec Indian from the state of Oaxaca, elected governor of his state in 1847, he was expelled from Mexico in 1853 when conservative dictator Santa Anna took power. But if Santa Anna had hoped to secure his presidency, he should have killed Juárez when he had the chance. In 1854, Juárez joined a Mexican revolutionary faction while living in exile in New Orleans, Louisiana. He and other liberal revolutionaries snuck back into Mexico, overthrew Santa Anna, and sent him into exile by the end of the year. Returning to his position as governor of Oaxaca, Benito Juárez quickly rose to become leader of the Liberal Constitutional Party, only to be ousted again by conservatives a couple of years later in December 1857. Not to be defeated, in retaliation and with support from his liberal counterparts, Juárez declared himself Mexican president a month after his expulsion, in January 1858. As it was, two Mexican presidents were now concurrently serving in office. Thus began the bloody reform war that lasted the following 3 years. When President Juarez finally gained control of Mexico City in 1861, it became clear that the former president had left him with little more than a dilapidated government, a bankrupted treasury, and significant outstanding debts to Europe. Mexico now owed Britain, Spain, and France a staggering sum of $300 million in unpaid debts, what would today be nearly $11 billion. Faced with rebuilding his crippled nation from the ground up, believing his debtors could not expect to squeeze blood from a stone, Juarez chose to default. Following his staunch refusal to repay these indemnities immediately, the three nations simultaneously broke diplomatic relations with Mexico. A European coalition was formed in Paris to intervene in Mexico and seek reparations. Juarez's newly established government similarly made fast enemies of the old guard, the Catholic Church. By curtailing the Church's virtually unlimited power over Mexican affairs. In retribution, Mexican clergymen and their allies sought once again to overthrow Juarez and establish a Catholic monarchy instead. Emissaries sailed for Europe in search of allies. Their plea for intervention was heard by Napoleon III. With Mexico significantly indebted to France, combined with his long-harbored fantasies of world dominion, the emperor found the Church's request irresistible. A French expeditionary corps soon set sail, intending to reclaim their debts and colonize Mexico by military force. Following this unexpected invasion, the Mexican Congress quickly granted Juarez special executive powers. On September 2026, 1861, he again declared war, but this time on France. Over the following 3 years, the already beleaguered Mexican army, now composed primarily of newly drafted and inexperienced soldiers, would eventually be picked apart by the highly trained French army. Juarez's control of the country quickly fell to Napoleon, who then imposed a new emperor over Mexico, Archduke Maximilian of Austria. Under Maximilian, Juarez soon lost many of his remaining generals, not by death, but by betrayal. They abandoned his resistance effort and submitted to the new French government in exchange for irresistible offers of position and wealth. With the Mexican Federal Army now scattered to the wind, Juarez and his remaining few loyal comrades were forced to flee the capital and take refuge in the mountains. Unwilling to relent, Juarez resorted to his only remaining option, to continue fighting guerrilla warfare. Inevitably, over the next 3 years, two factors would bring a successful end to Juarez's persistent fight for independence. A combination of Emperor Maximilian's extreme unpopularity with the Mexican people, along with eventual diplomatic intervention by the United States on behalf of Mexico. Napoleon would ultimately withdraw from Mexico entirely, leaving Maximilian's government to be quickly overthrown. Maximilian was likewise abandoned to fend for himself. He fled for his life briefly, only to be caught and executed by Juarez. But our story of the cursed treasure takes place at the onset of Juarez's unrelenting guerrilla war against the French army, which began in 1864. The story begins with President Juarez delegating his top military priority after fleeing to the mountains, the acquisition of rifles and ammunition for his men. This would require the help of the Americans. Around the time of Juarez's transition to guerrilla warfare, possibly because of family ties to Mexico or simply their love of a good fight, hundreds of American idealists and adventurers had enlisted to fight alongside Juarez to overthrow Maximilian. Among these were even a handful of Union Army officers, evidently those from southwestern territories like Arizona and New Mexico that were not currently engaged in the ongoing American Civil War, primarily fought in the eastern United States. Whatever their reasons, these American military men became an integral part of Juarez's secret plan to purchase firearms from the Union Army garrisoned in California. First, Juarez turned to one of his remaining few but loyal Mexican commanders, General Placido Vega, who orchestrated the fundraising effort. A Union officer, Major Horace Bell, recounted this portion of the story in his memoirs. "Talk about patriotism, you never saw anything like it. Aristocrats threw diamonds and pearls that had been heirlooms for generations into the common heap until it was estimated that $200,000 had been acquired in this way, without counting cash contributions. Once collected, General Vega consigned the valuables to his own trusted aide and dispatched him along with 3 other trusted men to deliver the war chest to San Francisco. 2 of these men served as bodyguards, one of them an American Union officer named Captain Henry Malcolm. Setting out from the coastal city of Mazatlan, laden with gold coins, silver, diamonds, family heirlooms, and other jewelry, the 4 men headed north to San Francisco. Perhaps these men were not alone in their journey. It would soon seem as if they had a 5th traveling companion, one who goes by the name the Angel of Death. "Carlos, get hold on there." One, what happened to him? Is he alright? Capitan, no, PY sir, let's see if we can revive him. No, Capitan, he is gone. Look, nobody just up and dies like that. Assassin, Senor. I wouldn't put it past those sneaky French bastards. But we can't take any chances. Keep your eyes open, we ain't safe until we reach San Francisco. Hey Antonio, why did you insist on making a coffee this morning, Are you accusing me now, Manuel? Yeah, maybe I am. You're the one who's been complaining the whole time. You think I did this? Maybe if you think you can kill us all, you can take the treasure. That's enough. General Vega chose all of us because he knew he could trust us. Everyone here is loyal to Juarez. Don't start that, now we're just as likely to get killed standing here. Best we get moving. Mount up. Soon after embarking from Mazatlan, General Placido Vega's trusted envoy died a sudden and mysterious death. That's death number 1, attributed to the treasure's curse. There is no indication in historical records that the men determined the cause of his death. Captain Malcolm, however, suspected foul play at the hands of French secret agents. The rest of the journey proceeded under a dark cloud of fear and suspicion. The men kept close watch on the trail behind them, ahead of them, and the surrounding hills for spies. They even began to suspect one another. After a wearisome journey of nearly 1,500 miles, much to their annoyance, the remaining 3 men quickly realized that San Francisco would offer no sanctuary from Emperor Maximilian's long reach. The city was now crawling with French spies. Unsure how to proceed without risking the mission's success, Malcolm and the other 2 bodyguards decided to hide the treasure. They divided the gold and jewelry into 6 portions, wrapped each in buckskin, rode to a location well outside of town, and buried these satchels in a secluded spot in the surrounding hills. Determined to wait for further instructions, a dispatch was sent back to Mexico with Captain Malcolm urgently requesting that General Vega meet them in San Francisco and assume personal control. With General Vega's arrival approaching, the 3 men returned to retrieve the treasure before meeting him. However, their frantic digging was in vain. They stared at a gaping hole and the crushing realization that the war funds had disappeared. With suspicions already running high due to the first man's death, Captain Malcolm's fellow bodyguards immediately began to argue. Ignoring Malcolm's efforts to stop them, their argument turned violent, and the 2 men ended up killing each other. Deaths numbers 2 and 3. General Vega finally arrived, and Malcolm informed him of the tragic and baffling turn of events. Despite all appearances of guilt, the general was remarkably forgiving. In Malcolm's words, Vega exonerated him from blame and held him above suspicion. Like his fellow couriers, however, Captain Henry Malcolm would not live long enough to find out what became of the lost treasure. After the war, Major Horace Bell recounted that in 1880 he received terrible news. His army buddy Captain Malcolm had been killed in Waterville, Arizona, just outside Tombstone. Malcolm died while trying to break up a fight in his bar, of which he was the proprietor. The man who killed him fled but was quickly captured by Deputy Sheriff Wyatt Earp. All of this was cited in an August 2026, 1880, article in the local paper, the tombstone epitaph, and the following day in the Arizona Daily Star. Captain Henry Malcolm is otherwise documented in Arizona voter records as living in Pima County at the time. Although Captain Malcolm was killed years later and far from where the treasure was, his involvement in transporting it, followed by a similarly sudden and painful death, is widely considered linked to the treasure's curse. That's death number 4. So what happened to the treasure? As fate would have it, 5 years after hearing about the tragic death of his friend Henry, now in 1885, Major Horace Bell again heard news about the treasure's whereabouts. His source was a Frenchman named Martin Lay, keeper of a tavern in Los Angeles just south of the Cahuenga Pass. In his memoir, likely to protect the true identity of his source, Major Bell scribbled out the typed name, Lay, and changed the tavern keeper's name to Lawrence Ashper when his memoirs were posthumously published after his death. This incredible story of the missing treasure was made known under the name Isha in print. LA County records do verify, however, that in 1887 a tavern called 6 Mile House Tavern, located at what is now the corner of Sunset Boulevard and Gower Street in Hollywood, was indeed owned not by Leon Escher, but by a man named Martin Lay. When the two men spoke, Lay the tavern keeper told Bell that a Basque shepherd who regularly grazed his flock in the Cahuenga Pass had recently unearthed a heavy, tattered buckskin parcel. The young immigrant shepherd explained that his dog was drawn to the base of a Fresno tree, likely an ash tree, and after some digging, had uncovered buckskin leather. Pulling it up, the man was shocked to find 100 gold coins tucked inside, along with various jewelry. He had then stopped at the nearby tavern and exuberantly displayed his find to its owner Lay, planning to now leave his life as a poor shepherd behind. He told the tavern keeper of his plans to soon set sail and return to his home in Spain. After hearing Lay recount the story, Major Horace Bell immediately suspected that the buckskin package was one of the 6 parcels his friend Malcolm said he had buried outside San Francisco, and Bell's suspicions would soon be confirmed. So anyway. And then Henry, your soldier compadre? Yes, that one. Well, he gets himself killed down in a bar fight in Arizona. Oh, and that is terrible. I am so sorry. Well, let me finish, you're not going to believe this. So after he dies, a few years later, I end up having a drink at the 6 Mile, Martin's place. Yes, of course. And so he starts telling me about how some shepherd came into his tavern one day raving about how he had found a bag of gold in the pass just north of here, right? That one. And this shepherd, I am sorry, Horace, but allow me to interrupt you. What's the matter, José? Look like you've seen a ghost or something. Perhaps I have, amigo. You say Martin had a shepherd come in and say he found gold in the northern pass? That's right, that's what he said. Anyway, never saw it, of course. He was telling the truth, is that right? How do you figure? This is unbelievable. Like the hand of God. What are you talking about, José? Horace, now I'm afraid you will not believe me. When I was a niño, some 25 years ago, my stepfather came home one day with a very sick man. His name was Diego Moreno. He was also a shepherd. He told my father and I the most incredible story about gold. A few years later, during the early 1890s, Bell recalled sharing this story about the missing treasure with a friend, a Los Angeles policeman named José Gumizindo Correa. Upon hearing it, Correa recounted an extraordinary memory from his childhood, an account that would finally explain how the treasure originally made its way from its disappearance near San Francisco to its reappearance in the Cahuenga Pass back in 1866. Correa's stepfather, Don Jesus Martinez, had unexpectedly brought home a haggard-looking stranger. The sickly stranger identified himself as Diego Moreno and said he had once worked as a shepherd on a rancho near San Francisco. Moreno revealed that, in spite of his humble appearance, he was in fact the owner of a phenomenal treasure. He then told young Correa and his stepfather Martinez just how he had come into possession of this great wealth. While tending his flock 2 years earlier, Moreno had watched from a distance as 3 men buried 6 heavy buckskin parcels in the hills outside San Francisco. The men were evidently not aware of the shepherd's presence and that he was watching them. His curiosity getting the better of him, Moreno said he returned later that night, unearthed the bundles, and discovered they were filled with gold and jewels. Both elated and terrified, Moreno quickly loaded up the treasure and immediately headed for his home in Sonora, Mexico. He got as far as the Cahuenga Pass, the northern mountain gateway to Los Angeles. Moreno said he stayed at a primitive tavern or jackal near the south end of the pass. It was there, during the night, he was visited by a terrifying dream. By some accounts, it seems he dreamt that an angel came to him and warned him that if he ever entered the city of Los Angeles with the treasure, or spoke of it to anyone, he would die. Whatever the dream was, nightmare, vision, or premonition foreseeing his own death, it left Moreno terrified. As a precaution, he decided to heed the warning. He buried the 6 parcels in the nearby pass before entering the city. Foregoing his return home to Sonora, Moreno then spent the next 2 years living in Los Angeles, wanting to remain close to the treasure while he figured out what to do with it. He made a few local friends but struggled to find consistent work, subsequently becoming malnourished. Because of this, he eventually became ill, now haggard and weakened, too sick to care for himself. That is when he found shelter with one of his only friends, Don Jesus Martinez, who took him in and introduced him to his stepson, a future police officer and future friend of Major Horace Bill, the young Jose Correa.